Ahoy, listeners! Welcome aboard to another exciting episode of The Melody of the Mermaid and the Rebel Pirate, your favorite podcast where we dive into the tales of the high seas, the myths of the ocean deep, and the legendary figures who've carved their names in maritime lore. I'm Blue Stud, your host for today's segment. Our dear Daisy Mare is off on some thrilling new ventures at the moment, but don't worry, she'll be back before you know it. In the meantime, I'll be your guide through today's adventure. Now let's get right into the heart of the matter. Today, we're exploring the saga of Captain Jack, a pirate with a heart as bold as his sails are wide, and Drizzle, a mermaid turned human whose life has been nothing short of magical and dangerous. These two have faced more than just the perils of the sea. They've crossed paths with none other than the nefarious Captain Greybeard. This young pirate, with his eerie gray hair and ambition that knows no bounds, is a force to be reckoned with. But more on him in a moment. Captain Jack, as many of you know, is no ordinary pirate. He's a man who's seen it all, treasure hunts, naval battles, and now a mermaid who's taken on human form. Drizzle, once a creature of the deep, now walks among us, discovering the wonders and dangers of life on land. But her transformation hasn't just brought her closer to Captain Jack, it's also made her a target. Enter Captain Greybeard. This young, cunning pirate isn't just after golden glory. He knows a secret about Drizzle's transformation. You see, when a mermaid becomes human, she doesn't just leave her fins behind. She becomes something more, something that could lead to unimaginable treasures. And Captain Greybeard, with his sharp mind and ruthless crew, has made it his mission to seize that power for himself. But what happens when these two forces collide? When the loyalty of Captain Jack's crew is tested, and when Drizzle's newfound humanity becomes both a gift and a curse? That, my friends, is the tale we're unraveling today. So sit tight, grab your favorite drink, and let's sail through this stormy sea of adventure, betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between our heroes. A mother's strength. The sun had barely risen over the shores of Knees Up Island when the crew carried Captain Jack back to the ship. The battle had left its mark, not just on the beach, but on every soul who had fought that day. But none bore the weight of it more than Nia, Captain Jack's mother. Inside the captain's quarters, the air was thick with tension and the scent of blood. Nia, her face set with determination, worked swiftly to clean the gruesome wound where her son's left hand had once been. Her long black hair was tucked under a white head wrap, but strands of it clung to her damp forehead as she concentrated on the task before her. Captain Jack lay on the bed, his face pale and contorted in pain. His strong frame, usually so full of life and vigor, now trembled with the effort of holding back his cries. He had faced countless dangers at sea, but nothing had prepared him for the agony of losing a hand. Nia's hands moved with practiced skill, though her heart was breaking with every wince Jack made. She poured a clear liquid over the wound, and the sharp smell of alcohol filled the room. Jack gritted his teeth, a low groan escaping his lips as the alcohol seared his exposed flesh. "Hold him steady," Nia commanded, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. A burly pirate, who had stayed behind to help, did as he was told. He gripped Jack's shoulder, trying to keep him from thrashing as Nia worked. The pirate's face was a mask of concern, but he followed Nia's lead without question, knowing that she was the only one who could tend to Jack in his time of need. Nia's heart ached with every touch, every grimace of pain on her son's face. But she pushed it aside, drawing on an inner strength she didn't know she had. She had been through hardships before, but nothing like this. Still, she couldn't afford to falter now. Jack needed her to be strong. "Almost done, my son," she whispered, her voice tender yet unshakable. "Just hold on a little longer." Jack nodded weakly, his eyes clouded with pain. His breaths came in ragged gasps, but he fought to stay conscious, to stay with her. At the doorway, Drizzle stood frozen, her mint-green eyes wide with fear and sorrow. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the scene unfold, her heart breaking for Jack and Nia. She felt helpless, torn between wanting to comfort them and being too afraid to step closer. Nia caught a glimpse of Drizzle's tear-streaked face and offered her a small, reassuring nod. "He'll be all right, Drizzle," she said softly, even as she pressed a clean bandage against the stump of Jack's arm. "He's strong, and so are we." Drizzle sniffled, trying to hold back her sobs. She wanted to believe Nia's words, but the sight of Jack's pain was almost too much to bear. She clutched the doorframe, wishing there was something, anything she could do to help. Nia finished securing the bandage, her hands steady despite the turmoil inside her. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, as she finally allowed herself to acknowledge the full weight of what had happened. Her son had lost his hand, but he was alive, and for that, she was grateful. The burly pirate stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "Will he be all right, Miss Nia?" he asked, his voice gruff but full of concern. Nia nodded, her face calm but her eyes betraying the depth of her emotions. "He'll live," she replied, her voice strong, "but he'll need time to heal, and we'll be here for him every step of the way." Captain Jack, exhausted from the ordeal, let out a soft sigh as the pain began to dull. He looked up at his mother, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Nia smiled down at him, her heart swelling with love and pride. "Rest now, Jack," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You've been through enough for one day." As Jack's eyes fluttered shut, Nia turned to Drizzle, who still stood at the doorway. "Come, child," she said, her tone softening. "He'll need all the love we can give him." Drizzle hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room. She wiped her tears and moved to Jack's side, taking his remaining hand in hers. Nia placed a comforting hand on Drizzle's shoulder, offering her a small smile. Together they watched over Captain Jack as he drifted into a restless sleep, the pain of the day's events slowly giving way to the promise of healing. The Hook of Legends. Months had passed since the bloody battle on the shores of Nizup Island. Captain Jack, though scarred from the loss of his left hand, had begun to heal in body and spirit. The pain had faded into a dull memory, and in its place a new strength emerged. Jack had never been one to wallow in despair. Instead, he turned his misfortune into something powerful, a symbol of his resilience and his unyielding will. One of the finest craftsmen in Jack's crew, a wiry old man with a talent for forging the extraordinary, had taken it upon himself to craft something special for the captain. He worked day and night, pouring all his skill and care into a creation that would honor Jack's legacy and forge a new path for him. The result was nothing short of breathtaking, a hook made from rare gold and adorned with a cayenne-colored ruby, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The hook was not just a tool, but a masterpiece, reflecting the light and hues of blue and gold that danced like the waves on a sunlit sea. When Jack first saw the hook, he was speechless. He carefully attached it to the stump of his left arm, testing its weight and balance. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been a part of him. Over time, he grew fond of it, appreciating not only its craftsmanship, but also the sense of power and control it gave him. The hook became more than just a replacement for his lost hand. It became a part of his identity, a reminder of the battles he had fought and the strength he had gained. With his new hook gleaming in the sun, Captain Jack and his crew set sail once more, their course leading them into the darkest parts of the sea. This was no ordinary voyage. They were venturing into uncharted waters, where the map turned black and the stars were hidden by thick, ominous clouds. The sea here was different, deeper, darker, and filled with secrets that had been lost to time. It wasn't long before they found themselves approaching the legendary land of the mermen, a place spoken of only in hushed whispers in old sailors' tales. The mermen were a strange and dangerous race, some as hideous as nightmares, others as handsome as kings. Their domain was a kingdom beneath the waves, filled with treasures beyond imagination and dangers beyond comprehension. As they sailed deeper into merman territory, the crew grew uneasy. The water was unnaturally still, and the air was thick with tension. They knew they were being watched, though by what or whom they could not say. Then one day, as they sailed through a narrow channel between towering cliffs of black rock, they encountered him, Janga, the most feared of all mermen. Janga was a creature of dark majesty, his body sleek and powerful, his eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. His scales were black as night and his teeth were sharp and gleaming. But it was his voice, deep and resonant like the roll of distant thunder, that sent chills down the spines of all who heard it. He rose from the depths, blocking their path with an air of authority that could not be ignored. "So it's true," he rumbled, his gaze fixed on Drizzle. The little mermaid who betrayed her kind for the love of humans. Drizzle stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. Janga, she said, her voice steady. I did not betray anyone. I chose my own path. Jenga's eyes narrowed, his anger palpable. You chose the path of weakness, he hissed. You abandoned the sea, your true home, for these land dwellers. He spat the word with contempt, his gaze shifting to Captain Jack, who stood defiantly beside Drizzle, his golden hook glinting in the dim light. Jack raised his hook, his voice strong and clear. She made a choice, and it's her right to do so. If you've got a problem with that, you've got a problem with me. Jenga's laughter was low and menacing. You're brave, pirate, but bravery won't save you from the wrath of the sea. He circled the ship, his presence casting a dark shadow over the crew. Drizzle's decision has consequences. She has brought danger upon you all. The sea does not forgive easily. The tension on the deck was palpable, the crew readying themselves for a fight. But Drizzle stepped forward, her eyes locked on Jenga's. I will not be swayed by threats, she said firmly. I have found a life worth living, and I will not be dragged back into the depths out of fear. Janga snarled, his patience wearing thin. Then you leave me no choice. The sea demands retribution, and if you do not return willingly, you will face the consequences of your actions. With that, he disappeared beneath the waves, leaving an ominous silence in his wake. The crew looked to Captain Jack, their faces etched with concern. They knew this was not the end, but the beginning of a new battle, one that would test their courage and their bonds like never before. Jack lowered his hook, his expression grim. Prepare for anything, he ordered, his voice steady. Janga won't give up easily, but neither will we. As the ship sailed onward, deeper into the land of the mermen, the crew knew they were heading into the unknown. But with Captain Jack at the helm and Drizzle by his side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sea was vast and dangerous, but so were they. Shadows in the deep, the sea serpent sailed through the treacherous waters of the darkest part of the sea, its black sails cutting through the dense fog like a knife through butter. Captain Jack and his crew navigated this uncharted territory with a mixture of caution and confidence. They had faced many dangers in their time, but nothing could prepare them for the mysteries that lay hidden in these murky depths. Unknown to them, Captain Greybeard was not far behind. His ship, the Black Fury, a menacing vessel with darkened sails and a crew as ruthless as the sea itself, followed at a careful distance. Greybeard's eyes were fixed on the sea serpent, his mind consumed by thoughts of the treasure that could be his if only he could seize Drizzle. He had learned of the mermaid's transformation and the power she now held, and he would stop at nothing to take it for himself. But for now, he remained in the shadows, biding his time. Meanwhile, Jack's crew was blissfully unaware of the danger lurking behind them. Their focus was on navigating the eerie waters where the mermen resided, a place where beauty and horror coexisted in strange harmony. Some mermen were hideous creatures with jagged teeth and scales as dark as night, while others were strikingly handsome, with smooth skin and eyes that glowed like sapphires. The crew knew they were being watched. For days, the mermen had been trailing them, their sleek forms cutting through the water with ease. Yet the mermen kept their distance, observing the humans with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The sea serpents sailed on, the days stretching into weeks as they made their way through the heart of the mermen's domain. One day, they came upon a small, rocky island that rose sharply from the sea. This was no ordinary island. It was a pirate's haven, a place where crews from all corners of the world could rest, trade, and indulge in the pleasures of the land. The island's shore was lined with makeshift taverns, crude huts, and the sounds of raucous laughter and clashing swords filled the air. Captain Jack ordered the ship to anchor, and the crew eagerly disembarked, ready to stretch their legs and trade their goods. The island was alive with activity, pirates from different ships haggling over treasures, drinking hearty ale and engaging in friendly or not-so-friendly brawls. It was a place where alliances were made and broken in the span of an afternoon. But not everyone was keen to leave the safety of the ship. Drizzle, who had grown more comfortable in her human form, but still felt the pull of the sea in her veins, hesitated. The island, with its loud, boisterous inhabitants and chaotic energy, was overwhelming. She decided to stay aboard, seeking the familiar company of Nia. Nia, sensing Drizzle's unease, stayed behind as well. They spent the afternoon together on the deck, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Nia spoke softly to Drizzle, sharing stories of her past and offering words of comfort. Drizzle listened, grateful for the older woman's presence. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As night fell, the crew returned to the ship, their spirits high from the day's trade and revelry. Captain Jack was in good spirits, having secured a few valuable items and shared a laugh with old acquaintances. The sea serpent set sail once more, its bow cutting through the dark waters as the island faded into the distance. But their journey back to the open sea was far from peaceful. As they left the island behind, the waters grew colder, and the fog thickened once again. The mermen, who had been silent observers, began to reappear, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. And at the forefront of them was Janga, the menacing merman who had confronted them before. Janga's powerful form rose from the depths, flanked by his merman minions. The crew tensed, weapons ready, but Janga did not attack. Instead, he circled the ship, his gaze fixed on Captain Jack. "You are being followed," Janga hissed, his voice echoing over the water. "And I am the least of your problems." Captain Jack narrowed his eyes, the weight of Janga's words sinking in. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his hand tightening around the golden hook that now defined him. Janga's lips curled into a sneer. "There is another who seeks what you have. He is closer than you think." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Janga continued, his tone darkening. "You sail into the hands of your doom, Captain. The one who follows you will bring only death and destruction." Jack's heart pounded as he realized the truth in Janga's words. He glanced back at Drizzle, who stood beside Nia, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Janga knew about Captain Greybeard, and deep down, Jack understood that the danger was far greater than he had anticipated. The tale of Janga and Nero. As the sea serpent cut through the dark waters, the crew busied themselves with preparations for whatever lay ahead. But on the deck, under the dim glow of the moon, a different kind of tension simmered. Nia stood beside Drizzle, her eyes narrowed as she watched the sea, her mind churning with questions. After a long silence, Nia turned to Drizzle, her voice soft, yet edged with concern. "Do you know him, Drizzle?" she asked, her gaze searching the mermaid-turned-human's face. "Do you know Janga?" Drizzle hesitated, her heart heavy with memories she had tried to bury. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. The admission hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken words. Nia's expression darkened with disappointment, though she tried to mask it with understanding. She had grown to care for Drizzle, but now she feared there was more to this story than she had ever imagined. "How?" she asked quietly, her tone gentle yet insistent. Drizzle sighed, the weight of the past pressing down on her. She had hoped to leave these memories in the depths of the sea, but now there was no avoiding them. "It's a long story," she began, her eyes clouding over with the sadness of recollection. Nia waited patiently, sensing that this was a tale Drizzle needed to tell, not just for Nia's sake, but for her own. "Janga," Drizzle continued, her voice trembling slightly, "is my brother. He wasn't always like this. Angry, vengeful. There was a time when he was happy, in love even. But that love was forbidden." Nia's eyebrows knitted together in surprise. "Forbidden?" she echoed, her curiosity piqued. Drizzle nodded, her gaze distant as she recalled the events that had set everything into motion. Nero was her name. She was a siren, beautiful and deadly, with a voice that could enchant the strongest of sailors. But to Janga, she was just Nero, the love of his life. They met in secret, away from our father's watchful eyes, and for a while, they were happy. "But sirens and mermen," Nia began, understanding dawning on her. "Should never be together," Drizzle finished, her voice heavy with regret. "Our families had a long history of rivalry. My father and Nero's family were bitter enemies, and the idea of Janga and Nero being together was unthinkable. When I was young, too young to understand the full consequences of my actions, I saw them together. I didn't mean any harm, but I told my father what I had seen." Nia listened, her heart aching for the young Drizzle who had unknowingly set such tragic events into motion. "My father was furious," Drizzle continued, her voice breaking slightly. "He forbade Janga from seeing Nero again. He said their love was dangerous, that it would bring ruin to both our families. Janga tried to fight it, but there was nothing he could do. He was too young, too afraid to go against our father's wishes. And Nero? Nia asked, her voice soft with sympathy. Nero was devastated, Drizzle replied, tears welling up in her eyes. She and Janga blamed me for everything. They believed that if I hadn't told our father, they could have been together, free from the chains of our family's hatred. Janga never forgave me. He became bitter, angry, and over time, he changed. Nero, too, became consumed by her own darkness. She blamed me for their fate, for the loss of their love. Nia reached out and gently placed a hand on Drizzle's shoulder, offering comfort in the only way she knew how. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "You were just a child. You couldn't have known what would happen." "But I did know," Drizzle whispered, her voice thick with guilt. "I knew that our families hated each other, and yet I told him. I didn't understand the consequences, but that doesn't change what happened." The two women stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the waves the only thing filling the void between them. "So that's why Janga is so angry," Nia said quietly, piecing the story together. "He's not just angry at humans, he's angry at you." Drizzle nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, he's never forgiven me for what happened. And now, with everything that's going on, I fear he'll never let it go." Nia pulled Drizzle into a gentle embrace, holding her as she wept. "We'll face whatever comes," Nia whispered, her voice steady. "Together. You're not alone in this." As Drizzle leaned into Nia's comforting presence, she couldn't help but wonder if the wounds of the past could ever truly heal, or if they were destined to haunt her forever. And as they looked out at the dark sea, where Janga and his minions lurked beneath the waves, they both knew that the past was far from over. The echoes of old rivalries and forbidden love still lingered, and the consequences of those long-ago actions were only just beginning to unfold. Shadows of the deep. Weeks had passed since their fateful encounter with Janga. The sea serpent remained in the gloomy depths of merman territory, the crew growing weary and tense under the oppressive atmosphere. The days were dark, the waters murky, and the mermen's eyes glinted from the shadows beneath the waves. Drizzle could feel the weight of her confession to Nia pressing down on her like a stone. She had revealed everything to Nia. How Nero, the evil siren, had once been in love with her brother Janga. How their father had kept them apart, and how Janga and Nero had blamed her for their fate. The past seemed to coil around her like an anchor, pulling her down into the depths of regret. "You have to tell Jack," Nia had insisted more than once, her voice gentle but firm. "Secrets can ruin friendships. He deserves to know the truth." But Drizzle could not bring herself to do it. She feared what Jack might think, how he might react. So she kept the secret buried deep, hoping it would stay hidden beneath the sea's dark waves. One night, under a blood-red moon that cast eerie shadows across the deck, the sea seemed to hold its breath. The wind was still, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the hull. The crew had settled in for the night, unaware of the danger lurking in the fog. Suddenly, without warning, Greybeard's ship, the Black Fury, emerged from the mist, its black sails like wings of a raven. The pirate captain and his crew moved silently, sneaking aboard the sea serpent like phantoms. In the dead of night, they found Drizzle asleep in her quarters and swiftly took her, binding her arms and covering her mouth before she could scream. By the time Captain Jack and the others awoke, it was too late. Jack stormed onto the deck, rage flashing in his eyes, waving his gold and cyan-colored ruby hook. "Greybeard, you won't get away with this," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the water. Greybeard, holding a struggling Drizzle, laughed wildly from his own ship. "She's mine, Jack! There's no way you're getting her back," he taunted, pulling Drizzle closer and sniffing her hair with a wicked grin. "She smells of magic and treasure, and she's all mine now." Drizzle fought back, kicking and thrashing in his grip, but Greybeard's crew held her fast. Within moments, the Black Fury was sailing away, disappearing into the darkness with Drizzle's cries fading into the night. When Janga learned of Drizzle's capture, his fury was swift and fierce. He emerged from the water with a face like a storm. "How could you let this happen?" he demanded, his voice like thunder. "She's my sister." Jack's expression was grim, filled with guilt. "I didn't know Greybeard would come for her. I didn't know." Janga cut him off, his eyes blazing with anger. If she uses her power to navigate to treasures too much, she'll lose herself. She'll become worse than the evilest of sirens. You've put her at great risk, Captain. Jack, realizing the depth of the danger, felt a cold fear grip his heart. Then we have to find her, he vowed. Together. Reluctantly, Janga agreed. They set aside their enmity and forged an uneasy alliance, both driven by the urgent need to save Drizzle from a fate worse than death. For a month, they searched the treacherous waters of the Sea of Forgotten Treasures. When they finally found Drizzle, Jack's heart sank. She was no longer the same. Her eyes were distant, clouded with a strange haze. She seemed to have forgotten them, her voice soft and detached. She thinks she and Greybeard are friends, Janga whispered, his face pale with anguish. Her memory, it's fading. Jack clenched his fist, despair gripping him. What do we do now? Jenga's face was grim as he said, There's only one who might help. Nero, the siren. Jack's eyes widened. The one who loved you? Yes, Janga nodded, his voice filled with sorrow. She's the only one who understands the depths of the siren's curse. I have to find her. Janga swam into the depths of the sea, seeking out Nero, his former love. When he found her, her beauty was as sharp and dangerous as he remembered. At first she resisted, her heart hardened by years of bitterness. Why should I help you? She demanded. You left me to my fate. Jenga's voice trembled with regret. Because I still care for you, Nero, and because my sister's life is at stake. I need your help. For a moment, Nero's eyes narrowed, her expression cold. But then she saw the sincerity in Jenga's face, the desperation. Slowly, her heart softened. All right, she whispered. I'll help, but only because I still care for you. Together, Jack, Janga, and Nero devised a plan to rescue Drizzle from Greybeard. They waited for a night when the sea was calm and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds. Nero sang a haunting siren song, her voice echoing across the water like a mournful wail. Greybeard's crew fell into a trance, their eyes vacant and lost. In the confusion, Jack and Janga fought their way onto the Black Fury. They reached Drizzle, who looked at them with a blank expression. Who are you? She whispered, her voice barely a breath. Drizzle, it's us, Jack pleaded. Remember us. Remember who you are. But Greybeard lunged forward with a snarl. She's mine now, he roared, drawing his sword. Nero's song grew louder, her voice filled with power, and Greybeard's eyes glazed over. He stumbled, his sword clattering to the deck as he began to sway, lost in a state of confusion. The siren song wrapped around him like a fog, and his crew too fell under its spell. They stood like zombies, their eyes empty, lost to the sea forever. Jack grabbed Drizzle's hand. Come with us, Drizzle, he whispered urgently. Slowly, recognition dawned in her eyes, and she blinked, as if waking from a long dream. Jack, Janga, she murmured, her voice full of uncertainty, but tinged with hope. Nero's song had worked. With Greybeard and his crew lost to the ocean's depths, Jack, Janga, and Drizzle sailed away from the Sea of Forgotten Treasures. Drizzle was safe for now, but they all knew that some memories and curses were harder to break than others. But as the sun rose, they had a new hope, a new chance to begin again. And for now, that was enough. As Captain Greybeard's ship drifted aimlessly through the darkest part of the ocean, the fog thickened around him like a living thing. The crew wandered the deck in a daze, eyes blank, faces slack with confusion. Greybeard himself stood at the bow, his posture rigid and his eyes staring vacantly into the void. Days had passed since Nero's haunting song had wrapped around his mind like a curse, and he hadn't eaten or slept. His mouth was parched, lips cracked, his once fierce expression reduced to that of a lost soul. His ship creaked and groaned, caught in the eerie calm of the ocean's stillness. Somewhere in the darkness, the water rippled gently, the only sound in a suffocating silence. As if sensing a presence, Greybeard blinked slowly, his eyes struggling to focus. Out of the depths, a figure began to follow his ship, her form moving with grace and ease through the water. She had long, flowing bluish hair, a color so vibrant it almost glowed in the dim light. Her eyes were a deep, enchanting shade of green, and her skin shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. She was as beautiful as the moonlit sea and bore a striking resemblance to Drizzle. The siren watched him with curiosity, her gaze intense and unyielding. Her lips parted, and she began to hum softly. her song floating through the air like a delicate breeze. The notes were different from Nero's. They were gentle, inviting, and filled with a mysterious tenderness. Graybeard felt his feet move of their own accord, drawn by the melody. His hands trembled as he stumbled toward the railing, his breath shallow. He leaned over the side, eyes wide, trying to catch a glimpse of the voice that had ensnared him. Without warning, his weakened body gave in, and he tumbled overboard, crashing into the cold, unforgiving water. For a moment, everything was darkness and cold. Then, through the swirling depths, he felt a pair of strong, slender arms wrap around him. The beautiful siren had dived into the water, her bluish hair swirling around them like a cloud, her hands steady as she pulled him up. She looked into his eyes and her song grew louder, more insistent. Her voice was like the rush of the tide, comforting and overwhelming all at once. As she sang, the fog in his mind began to lift. His eyes cleared, his breathing steadied, and he felt warmth return to his limbs. He gasped, suddenly alert, his heart racing. "Drizzle!" he choked out, confusion clouding his face. He blinked, staring at the siren who held him with an almost familiar tenderness. Is it you?" The siren merely smiled, her song never faltering, her eyes deep with ancient knowledge. She continued to sing, guiding him through the waves, her voice carrying him toward a distant, unknown shore. Graybeard's thoughts were a jumble, but one name remained, echoing in the depths of his consciousness. "Drizzle, Drizzle." Then something clicked in his mind. His expression shifted from confusion to realization, and a slow, wicked grin spread across his face. He remembered everything. The chase, the capture, the magic that lingered in the air around Drizzle. He knew who the siren resembled and what it could mean. A dark excitement sparked in his eyes as he looked at the siren who held him so tenderly in the water. "Ah, so you've come to me," he whispered, his voice filled with cunning. "Drizzle, or something more?" The siren continued to hold him, her smile unwavering, as if she knew secrets he could only guess at. And Graybeard, feeling a twisted thrill in his chest, laughed softly, his wicked smile growing wider as the waves carried them deeper into the unknown.